Aloha and welcome to the show. The 692nd podcast is a platform for developing and connecting with our airmen across the island and those now serving on the mainland. Tune in for episodes where we talk all things leadership and personal development while getting a glimpse into the lives of the people moving our missions forward. I'm your host, Master Sergeant Derek Addison, and this is the 692nd podcast. Welcome, Knights, Tigers, Hawks, Warriors, and Krakens to the final interview with Chief Master Sergeant Warren Triche. For those old enough to get the reference, this is Chief Triche's version of Randy Watson of Sexual Chocolate's Mic Drop. If you don't get the reference, please watch Coming to America with Eddie Murphy, then watch it again because it's amazing. Chief sits down and talks about his 25 years of service, some of the biggest parts of that time, and some of the most important experiences that have led him to be the Chief, Airman, and man that he is today. Enjoy this episode with Chief Master Sergeant Warren Triche. So I did have a question, but obviously this wasn't one of the
No, certain parts of this I'm sure are going to be more of a freestyle session.
Absolutely. I did have a question whenever you first got the job and we found out that you had just been sitting in for Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, right? What is it like to come and be a group chief after doing a job like that?
It was like I got paroled from prison. It was amazing. So for those who haven't worked at the Pentagon, which I would assume that anybody who's listening to this, probably most of the audience has not had that opportunity. It is an interesting place to work. So, quick story. I had actually never been to the Pentagon prior to getting picked up for that job. And so what I didn't recognize was, first, the Pentagon in and of itself is almost like a museum. It's like a mini museum. And so all of the hallways are lined with military artwork, right? So each military service branch has their own hallway. And so, some, like if you go to the Army hallway or the Marine hallway, they don't just have pictures or paintings on the walls. They actually have, mini models of, many types of weapon systems, like tanks or, ships or things like that. So it's pretty cool. So you could spend hours walking through the halls of the Pentagon, just looking at all the historical things that are all over the place. So it's very intimidating right from the start when you walk into that building. You see a lot of business professionals. There's a healthy mix of civilian versus, people actually wearing uniform. I would even say there's probably even more civilian, right? Yeah. And so as you're walking around, you start to notice that, so it's one of those type of places, just like a museum, like you can actually sign up for a tour. So, it's not uncommon to see a honor guard member from, any of the services. So whether it's in, Air Force honor guard or the Army, an Army soldier or a Navy sailor, so on and so forth, they have taken classes, if you will, to know a little bit about almost all of the hallways, to speak to, what you're seeing, what you're looking at, if there's something significant about a piece of art or whatever the case is. That's what they're a tour guide. And so this is what you walk into. If you hadn't been there before and you walk into this, you're like, this is kind of surreal. It's kind of crazy. And, oh, by the way, to think that, all of the most senior leadership in all of the military branches are sitting in this building. A perfect example, I was dropping off my dry cleaning one day and, Secretary Mattis was down there. He was notorious for doing all that stuff himself. So if he had put something in the dry cleaner, he would go himself to go get it. Obviously, that's what you would hope. You don't want to abuse your privileges. But so I say that to give context to kind of what it's like. So me coming into that job, I had definitely kind of an idea of what it was going to be like. But then when I got there, it kind of busted through any idea I had because I didn't know what to expect. And then when I actually got in to learn the job, all that stuff was fleeting. You know, it was exciting for the first month, and then after that, I realized that I'm no longer like working in a squadron, right? And so it's like all the things that people may not realize they enjoy about working in a squadron, working with other teammates, um, you know, uh, the mandatory fun events, potlucks, and all these things that we do at the squadron level, that we take for granted. Those things are pretty much absent working at that level. Really, people come to the five-sided war machine, as I call it, to work 5 days a week, 7 days a week, whatever your schedule is. You're there to work, and people have, it's almost like Walking Dead. Is how I would describe it. You start to see people, and they kind of seem like zombies, right? To the extent, I'd walk down the hallway, and if I saw somebody, just being cordial, good morning or whatever, I can't tell you how many times I said good morning to people, and it got to a point where I would deliberately like yell at people, good morning, kind of thing. And people would just not even acknowledge you and just try to get to where they're going, right? It was kind of one of those environments. And so it was, after 3 or 4 months in, is then I realized, man, this is, that's definitely a trade-off. We're operating at this level of leadership, the things that you again take for granted at the squadron level. And so, back to your question about leaving that job and coming to be the group superintendent here, I was looking forward, right, to escaping that environment, and having the opportunity to be given the space to connect with people in that way and do fun things again, right? Because obviously people at the Pentagon are there to take care of the service's needs, right? And it's really about the service. And so, when I was afforded the opportunity to get back to the people business, so to speak, I was all over. I was all over it. Now, I will say that there were a lot of cool things about working at the Pentagon. I'm not going to lie, right? So there's a definite trade-off, but I think many people that I've talked to that were working there at the time, we would often reminisce about being in the squadron and have an opportunity to do the fun things that we just didn't do
Yeah.
at the Pentagon.
So because of that experience, I think both being in a position where you didn't get to really interact with airmen versus your job now, where you have 1,100 that you get to interact with, pretty much 7 days a week, if you want to come in on your weekends, because we have those too, right? What does airmanship mean to you as a the group chief, the group superintendent, but also as a man who's just completed 25 years of service? What does airmanship mean?
What does airmanship mean? Wouldn't you like to know? No, I'm just joking. So I think that's kind of a question that has been posed different ways during my time, serving as an airman, right? For me, when I think back to kind of where I started out, as a airman basic, I joined for my own selfish reasons. I won't lie about that. Where I remember going to arriving in San Antonio. I feel like this is just what my memory is telling actually happened. But at some point where you had the liaisons meet you at the airport, and they're taking your little manila folders. I don't know if they still do that, but I feel like somebody asked us all, why we joined, right? And you had some people that were saying, "Oh, I just served my country," which I felt like they were not being truthful, right? And for most of the people who were honest, they joined for education benefits or to travel, right? And so
Right.
that was me. I was being honest. I joined for education benefits and to travel, which ultimately I wasn't going to school or anything like that when I first came in, so it was really to travel. And so starting out as airman basic, I was your average airman, right? I wasn't really invested in the idea of being a service member, other than I knew I was wearing a military uniform, and I knew that at any time I could be called to action to go deploy somewhere to actually do that side of being a service member. But in my 18-year-old mind, I was like, this is cool, right? I get to, I'm on my own, right? I can make my own decisions to an extent, right? If I wanted to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I could do that. I could do what I wanted with my $300 paycheck, right? Cool. So that's the extent of my commitment into service. And so when I think about that in those terms, what does it mean to be a professional, right? Is the extension of that question, what does it mean? What does airmanship mean to me? And so, I really didn't start to internalize any of that professionalism stuff, airmanship stuff, until maybe 4 years or 5 years in, right? For me, it was all about trying to see where my friends were hanging out, trying to circumvent some of the rules, if you know what I'm saying, whether that's, trying to go into clubs when I was underage, or, trying to sneak a drink, illegally, or whatever the case is, right?
I think statute of limitations is over.
Right,
You're great.
Right.
You're good.
We're good. So doing all that kind of stuff, just basically coming to work to collect a paycheck and then leaving, and gave not one second thought about work after I left work. And I was always trying to find ways to get out of work early, right? And so when I joined the Honor Guard, which was relatively soon into military service, at my first duty station, because my supervisor was an Honor Guard member for what is now called NASIC, but at the time NAIC. And so I got into that, and then that really kind of started everything from there. And so it wasn't immediate. I was still doing the same things. It's just I thought it was cool to get this different kind of uniform, and then I was getting hooked up with an achievement medal. It was all cool. So when I actually continued on with doing Honor Guard, I started to gain a deeper understanding of professionalism, what it means to be a professional in this regard, a profession of arms, right?
Right.
And so, at that, that matriculation was happening, and I was also, gaining more rank and responsibility. My first duty station was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then after 4 years, I PCS to Kadena Air Base. And so upon my arrival, I would say maybe a year into that assignment, I went to ALS, right? So oftentimes leaders will talk about their PMA experience, and for many, they can pinpoint, a PMA experience where some have that aha moment, right? And so ALS was not my aha moment, right? I was barely sober through ALS, barely passed, and had a great time. But literally that time span for when I became a supervisor after ALS was when I really started to take things a little bit more seriously, right? And so my internal mind was really doing a lot of reflection on what it meant to be an airman, and I was still doing Honor Guard at the time, and now I was being put into more roles of responsibility, even with Honor Guard, and then now as being a supervisor at work. And so I started to recognize this growth in myself, right? And so what I started to realize was that, what does it mean to be a professional? And then eventually, what does it mean? What does airmanship mean? And I think, along the way, I started to learn that it's about something greater than myself. And what that equates to is it's about the people I'm serving alongside, right? My teammates, or, if I am a supervisor, the people that I'm supervising, trying to be the best leader or teammate that I could be, because it's not about my selfish needs. I need to be selfless, right? And so I think that's what that's what airmanship is about, right? It's you're on this awesome team, right? If you want to equate it to, like, if we go to the Super Bowl, I want to go with the team that has the best odds of winning, right? And so, we have a proud history of service, and I think that's what it's all about, right? You just like in sports, there's more people on a football field than just a quarterback. There's more players on a basketball court than the point guard, right? Everybody has a role to play. And so, I think when I think about airmanship, that's one of the biggest lessons that I'll walk away from, right? The ability to understand that, hey, there is value in not doing things alone, right? Chief Wright used to say all the time, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Right.
And so I think that's sage advice. And when I reflect on airmanship and professionalism, it's a we thing, not a me thing. And so to the extent now that I'm transitioning out of the Air Force, as I'm looking to do some entrepreneurial type of things, I'm already thinking about how to shape my team, right? Because I already recognize I don't want to go it alone, right? How successful could I be by myself versus building a strong team so we can be that much more successful, getting some like-minded people who have similar goals and desires to collaborate. So
that kind of a spectrum that you were on, obviously the far left being Warren, doing Warren stuff, to, Staff Sergeant Triche doing more airmanship. How many years do you think that took? And is that, I'm assuming, for the majority of the airmen that are in our group that are in within that, maybe 4 to 5, 6 years that it took you, they're probably maybe in that same mindset of doing, Snuffy or, whatever, Derek's mindset versus Staff Sergeant Snuffy,
Yeah, for me, people, I've used this and I'm not the originator of this kind of saying, if you will, but, they say, whoever they are, right, you join the Air Force, right, when you sign on to go to basic training, but somewhere along the line, you actually join the Air Force. Right. And so really, I think it is, you enlist in the Air Force, but you don't actually join until later into your service for a lot of people.
Right.
So for me, when I pinpoint where I joined the Air Force, it was after NCOA. So going through NCOA, I was fortunate to go to ALS and NCOA at the same location at Kadena Air Base. And it was that point in my career where I was already starting to show signs of being more professional because I became a supervisor. I was taking more leadership and responsibility roles in my professional life. And so by the time I got to NCOA, I didn't go into it with the same mindset that I did ALS. ALS, I was looking for the next party. Hey, I'm going to do whatever the bare minimum is just to pass this requirement that they say I have to go to. But then by the time I got to NCOA, I was really soaking up all the information that was being, provided. And at that time I was the 8-up tech sergeant. I was that guy, you walking around with your hat off, I'm screaming at people in the parking lot, that was me, right? I was that honor guard, I had my battle dress uniform. For those who've never heard this term, BDUs were crisp. Man, I'm telling you, I used to have it down pat. I used to have my BDUs so crisp and tight that they were starched so good that I could literally stand my pants up without having them on, and they would stand upright. That's how much starch I had them. So the creases were razor thin. My boots were like glass. My hat was like a perfect, form, box shape type of situation going on, right? Everything was crisp. So that was kind of my mindset and how I was presenting myself to to the force, if you will, and my teammates. And so that it's all interconnected, right? And so when I joined, this is kind of what was a part of my growth. And I'll tell you, I didn't hold on to a lot of those things. As I started to grow even more as a leader, I started to then continue to do reflection and figure out what really mattered as it goes back to maintaining connections and building relationships and trying to hone my craft at, being a senior enlisted leader in the Air Force.
So just for the record, I want to let everyone know that you went to NCOA in 2006. So
we're doing dates. That's what we're doing. Dates.
I didn't say dates,
we're
just
doing
year.
Dates.
So that was 11 years in.
Fake news.
So you were doing more Warren for the first 10 years of your career.
I'd say 9.
Okay.
At about the 8 or 9, I started to. I was doing a little bit better.
Okay.
With the foolishness, and then I'd say about year 10 or 11, I was all in.
That's good.
I was all in. Don't put your hands in your pocket around me. It was a wrap.
Yeah. I will say that my wife thought it was ridiculous that I could take my BDUs off of the hangers, flip them upside down, the legs would stand straight up, and my blouse would sit on them and not fall to the ground. Yeah. She thought that was dumb.
Yeah. That is pretty dumb.
I'm not gonna lie. That's 3 years of tech school. I had to do that.
Yeah.
So, and I was green, yellow, red rope for 18 months.
Yeah.
So
I remember that's the ritual. Right?
That was a life.
Wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
Like I just get up and put on the OCPs. But
right.
Back then, you had to allot time to, do a once over with the iron on your BDUs.
Yep.
And make sure my boots you didn't have any scuffs or anything, no dust. Everything had to be, ready to go. Mm-hmm. So it was definitely a part of the morning ritual or the evening ritual, depending on what I had going on the next day.
Every Sunday night, at least in tech school at DLI, we would have this portable wash machine, and it would just be filled with concentrated concentrated starch. And and you'd soak it in there for a little bit, and you'd hang it up on a metal hanger, because if you put it on a plastic one, the plastic would fuse to your BDUs and you couldn't get it out. So I had to do the metal ones, and you had to stretch it.
Yeah.
So it kept those creases really bad. Yeah. It was dumb.
It's funny when you see somebody who had a uniform better than yours. It's like, oh man, how'd you get your pants like that? How you get your blouse like that? And everybody had their own tips and tricks and things that they were doing, and it was
I did say
culture.
I don't think there were anyone that had a better uniform than me, but I will say that one guy, he did have a smart idea using rave hairspray on top of the starch. After he would starch everything, he would do rave hairspray for that once over right before you go out in the morning, so that if it rained, you didn't smell like nasty starch. You smelled like rave hairspray, which had like a fruity smell to it. So that was a pro tip.
You seem like a fruity fellow.
I mean, it's fine. So I'd rather smell fruity than the opposite. So I don't know what the opposite of fruity is, but so
it's probably Tootie.
I will ask. This is a question that I asked myself whenever I was debating on getting out of the Air Force at 10 years, and I wanted to know, personally for me, I needed a reason to stay in. And one of the questions that I asked myself that I'll ask you now is, do you think that there are any unsolvable problems in the Air Force? Now, I asked myself that because I wanted to challenge myself. I didn't think that I was going to be challenged for the rest of my career because of the job that I had in Korea. I had 12 of them, and it was detrimental to me as a human being as well as my family. So I didn't want that for my family anymore. So I was planning on getting out, and then of course Colonel Sadari convinced me to stay in, got me a job at Goodfellow, loved it, stayed. But
here you are now in a sweaty, dank gym.
This is true, yeah.
Doing a podcast.
It's true.
Talking about Fruity and Tootie.
I'm not gonna lie. If we were over in Hangar 4 in our other spot, we'd all be sweating.
Okay.
So any unsolvable problems in the Air Force that you think of?
This is all about transparency. I'm gonna have to hit the yes button. I think there are definitely problems that are unsolvable in the Air Force. I am a believer that we are a microcosm of society, right? And there are a lot of society's ills that impact airmen and just service members in general, right? And so there are just, when I think about things that plague people, there are just things beyond our service's control that, hey, we are doing our best to mitigate. But I like to be more of a realist, realistically speaking, that, until there is more of a cultural shift within our society, there are just things that it's an insurmountable task to solve, the social issues of the day. For example, if the people that we, enlist into service are coming from society and bringing those things with them. So, but we can definitely mitigate and try to do our best to implement programs and support programs and build our level of knowledge across the force to lessen the impact or lessen the amount of things that can go wrong in regard to social, issues that will significantly impair our ability to execute the mission, right? So, I think that's a deep question because you can nitpick and you can try to get specific and obviously when we're talking about weapon systems, if you're talking about money, if you're talking about things that are directly tied to the service, that's one category of that question. But then it's all of the squishy that has to be a part of that question in my mind. All the squishy human feelings and the squishiness of it. If we're talking about suicide, we're talking about some of the connectedness and all of the things that we try to inspire our folks to come together more. When we talk about the Air Force family, right? Have more of a deeper family environment, so we can get after some of these things and be left of bang, so to speak. Try to prevent a problem before it becomes a problem. That'll be an ongoing battle, right?
Right.
And so, as we as members of society and the society at large starts to, shift, the culture starts to shift. I think we would see a shift in some of those issues that we deal with not be as prevalent if they're not as prevalent, other places.
Right.
To a degree, right?
I understand.
But I think that society looks to the military. The military are definitely pathfinders when it comes to things that since we're talking about social issues, I think we are definitely pathfinders when it comes to how we deal with those types of things, and the amount of effort that we put into things like suicide prevention, right? And so it's one of those examples of something that often I have a lot of family members, right, who have jobs who are not in the military. I venture to say that there is zero kind of suicide prevention anything in their workplace. I'm like 100% positive that's not a thing. Yes, there will be, they have human resources when it comes to, like, if there's any issues of unfair treatment or, sexual assault or sexual harassment. But I would also venture to say that, on the civilian side, non-government affiliated, people, employees are not often finding programs as robust as ours to, address things like sexual assault, sexual harassment, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think it's interesting when you try to do that reflection and do that comparison of, hey, I'm representing one of the greatest teams in the world, but what would life be like if I was on the civilian side, working in the civilian sector?
Yeah. Do you think that some of the civilian sectors, the reason why they don't have as robust, let's say, suicide prevention, is because they don't, in most career fields, in the civilian section, they don't have the amount of suicide, I guess the suicide rates that we do. Now, obviously, sexual assault and sexual harassment, that's prevalent across the world in every career field, every age range. So obviously HR systems have those, but for suicide specifically, do they need those?
So, I think it's all, I am not obviously operating in the civilian sector, but I can only guess that,
Yet.
by nature of some of the programs that I'm privy to, right? I think, for example, having experience in special operations, they have a program called Preservation of the Family and Force, which is essentially where our Airman resiliency team kind of was born out of, that concept. And so you can think of the Preservation of the Family and Force program within SOCOM as a art team on steroids, right? And so they long recognized that hey, if our mission, right, is to send war fighters to do highly specialized and surgical, do missions with surgical precision, and we're seeing that due to the amount of training and the amount of, or the high rate of their ops tempo and all this kind of stuff, that we're noticing that the ripple effect is impairing their ability, because we need essentially operators to be able to perform at 100% when they are in a deployed environment, or at least as close to 100% as possible. They started to do the trend analysis and see that there are all of these other things, social issues that were impacting that, some of those folks' ability to stay on task, right? And so a lot of money was put into standing up said program, that a lot of it actually isn't just focused on the military member. It's, when they talk about preservation of the family and force, that family piece is huge, right? So I was stationed at Herbert Field, and that was one of the most amazing things that I ever saw, was the amount of resources that were put towards the family. So there was always free events, there was always something going on, and usually extremely well attended. Whether it's like, maybe they shut down the pool for a day and the whole wing is there at the pool with their family, and they're, doing free food and, music going on, and really the base shuts down when something like that is happening. But it wouldn't be something that occurred like once a quarter. This is happening like once a month, right? And so when you start to peel back the onion and try to ensure that you're addressing all aspects of a potential problem, I think that obviously research is showing them on the special operations side that, hey, programs like this actually make a huge difference, right? If I can keep, Airman Snuffy or Wuffy's family situation, intact while they are downrange doing God's work, then there's a higher probability that Airman Snuffy or Wuffy is going to have the right focus that we need to do that precision execution of whatever their mission is going to be.
Right.
And so, I think that kind of bled over into our line of work, on the intel side with the Airman resiliency team, because, we were seeing a lot of high rates of suicide, not just in intel, but, this idea of kind of working in like a factory, if you will, for those folks who are on the DGS side of the house. That is why the response was to do this embedded healthcare or health support to get after the CAF pillars, right? And so, I think that on the civilian side, other than, a professional sports organization, right?
Right.
But I think it's a similar mindset, right? They put millions and millions of dollars towards their athletes because they recognize this is our greatest resource, are the people on that field. They understand the ripple effects that happen, positive and negative. If a team goes to the Super Bowl, or if they win the championship, right? Because if their players are at peak performance and they're doing all these things to keep them, 100, as healthy as possible, to hone their skills and hone their craft, to have it all come together at the right time in the right place, they see the benefits of that. And it's the same thing, we are no different. obviously, besides the $1 million paydays. But I think that given the responsibility that is put upon service members, right? We gotta do the things that we're seeing, because now you see the rest of the service expanding into, similar programs, embedded healthcare teams, and,
Right.
Maybe a little bit on a smaller scale, but, I think that says something. And I have no doubt that, in other places, if you were to venture out into other organizations on the civilian side that have a knowledge of what SOCOM has done, because it's not something that they've been doing forever.
Right.
That they are indeed leading and have proven the impact that a program like this has, and I wouldn't be surprised if other civilian agencies hadn't started to adopt just the way they do a lot of other stuff, military technology and things of that nature into their own organizations.
Yeah, it does kind of scare me a little bit whenever I see military grade, like drop protection on phone cases, and it's like, wow, that's a little different.
What is that though? What is military grade? Somebody
the first time
send me an email.
Every time I read that though, I always think lowest bidder.
Yeah.
So highest price, but lowest bidder.
That's usually that flashlight commercial, either flashlight or the eyeglass, the stupid eyeglasses like blue blockers.
Yep.
It's military grade lenses.
I think my new phone case. Yeah. My new phone case is military grade drop protection.
The wallet. That little micro wallet, that metal one. It's military grade metal.
That broke.
Yeah.
So I guess
that, Colonel Mac? Don't trust that military grade wallet you're using that you won at the Christmas party.
I got the carbon fiber wallet, but the little screws that hold it together, those broke.
They weren't military grade.
Yeah. So they were military standard, I'm sure. But so for you mentioned the times that you were in Kadena, obviously. As well as at Hurlburt Field, some of those memories. What are the strongest memories that you have of your service, and why did they leave kind of a lasting impact on you, not just as Chief Master Sergeant Triche, but also Warrant Triche?
So really, I'm gonna since I've had such a long career, I won't bore you with all of those, but I could really think about kind of like three things, right? Already talked about one, my involvement and eventual passion for honor guard. So that was definitely something that I look back to and reference often when I think about how I started to become the chief that I am today. It started with honor guard. It's one of the standout memories. The second is a particular deployment I had. It wasn't my last deployment, but it was around 2007, and I talked about this on one of my previous podcasts. I did a 6-month jet tasking, which is Joint Expeditionary Team. So back during this time frame, 2007, it was not uncommon for Army to pluck Air Force members to support a lot of their missions. And so fortunately for me, I got to do one of those jet taskings, and I went out on a crazy 6-month deployment in Iraq, doing some tactical SIGINT support for a bunch of the Army units. So and it's funny, I often refer to that time because I joined the Air Force for selfish reasons. So here I am thinking I'm joining to get some money to go to college and to travel the world and, live the dream, so to speak. I knew I was joining the profession of arms, and ultimately my job is to go to war. Cool. But the Air Force doesn't do that. That's why they're called the chair force, right? Even if I do deploy, which I had deployed prior to this one, I didn't leave the base, and I had a nice cushy office, air conditioning, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't in the real war. I wasn't in the shit, as they say.
Yeah.
So, but this one, I was, right? And I think it gave me a huge perspective on a lot of things. Number one, helped me really evaluate the realities of war, the realities of combat. It drove me to assess myself and how I saw, my service commitment to, when they talk about obviously following the orders of the leadership appointed over you. You say those words when you're re-enlisting and stuff, but it's a whole nother ball game if you're doing things that on a service level you may not necessarily agree with, right? Just being honest. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of internal struggle during that time frame because of that, and then also the fact that always feeling like I was going to die, right? I never expected to have to go through something like that, and so my daughter was 3 months old when I went on this deployment, and so the whole time I had all these mixed emotions, for 6 months. If it was, we're going in somebody's house and, we're there's other human beings that, we're pointing guns at, women and children and all this kind of stuff by nature of what we had to do to get the job done. That never sat well with me. But then feeling like I was going to die and never see, my daughter take her first steps, right? That was obviously very real, to the point to where you're always hearing explosions, right? And then there's that side of it, there's always, some element of fear as you're moving throughout a situation like that. And so I had an awakening also, like with my own fitness level, right? There was a point early on in that deployment where I realized that, I wasn't taking my own health as serious as I should, right? And I was like, I am not prepared physically to meet the demands of something like this. And it was then that I actually realized that I am the master of my own destiny, and quite literally, like I could be the determining factor on whether I live or die tomorrow because of my weak ass, if you will, because, I just never really got into exercising beyond just passing the PT test. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm skinny. I'll be all right. Right. I can pass my PT test, no problem. But, quite a different situation when you're relying on your fitness to, survive combat. Right.
Yeah.
Whole nother thing. So it was a lot of those things that I was dealing with. And then also upon the return, that whole reintegration piece, right? Going through a lot of traumatizing situations and then not having people to really, you feel like you could speak on it all day, but people really just don't understand unless they've been through it. Right.
Right.
So it took a while to really, do the proper reflection on something like that. And it was definitely something that was pivotal. Like I said, when I think about a memory, another memory that kind of shaped, who I am today, right? You're sitting right there, bro. We did the Spartan race.
We did.
Before that deployment, you would have never caught me on those doing anything remotely close to Spartan race or running a marathon. We used to do the Sunday Fun Day and all that kind of stuff. And I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that it was because of my growth on that aspect of trying to ensure that, I need to take care of myself because, I don't have a crystal ball. And it doesn't have to be combat because, I could get in a car accident and potentially survive or not survive because of my my fitness level, right?
Sure.
If I was not taking care of myself and so on and so forth, right? Yeah. I'm sure the listeners get all that. So I'll leave that there. And so that was the second thing, the second memory that definitely leaps out. And I'd say the third is recently working at the Pentagon, working, in the office of the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force. It was, like I said, it was an interesting place to work, but, working on a small team, because the funny thing is oftentimes people will say, oh, how was it working for Chief Master Sergeant Air Force? I was like, cool, I guess. He was always TDY, right? So really, my struggles occurred more so with the people that didn't travel, right? A lot of times, and just being in an environment like that could be very stressful at times, and just trying to deal with working at a level like that and feeling like you have to have a certain level of knowledge about a lot of different things, because my responsibility was to sit in for him in a lot of meetings when he wasn't there, and so that was frightening in the beginning, right? Like sitting at a table with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Secretary of the Air Force and other department general officers. That was surreal. And then just the comings and goings of the Pentagon. So I learned a lot about myself. So not to get too deep into it, but I'll tell the biggest lesson that I learned that I to this day give to everyone is that relationships matter. And where I went into that situation thinking I get along with anybody, right? If I choose to not build a relationship with you, that's because I chose, and if I wanted you to like me, you'd like me, kind of thing, right? I not that arrogant, but there was a certain air of arrogance because I feel like I had come through enough to feel like I know how to be and how to work with other people, and it was a rude awakening because that wasn't enough, right? That in my own mind I thought that I had it all figured out, but I didn't. There was still more for me to learn, and it pointed to my ability or inability to cultivate relationships with other adults who had also come a long way, and I just couldn't get there, right? I just couldn't get there, and it really took a toll on me physically, right? I was losing a lot of sleep and all this kind of stuff, and so I recognized that coming into this job, it goes back to your first question, that I was really looking forward coming here to get one last chance at doing things, hitting the reset button and doing things the way I would have liked to have done them, all that to say, build the kind of relationships in the Pentagon or in the office I was working in that I just didn't. And it wasn't all on me, but I take responsibility in a part I played in letting some of those things go the way they did. But it's difficult, right? When you're 25 years in and you're a mentor to others, and you always think to yourself, hey, I'm the expert. In the back of your mind, I'm giving out information from a position of expertise, but it's hard sometimes to swallow that you're not always, even 25 years of doing something, you still got a lot to learn, and you still have areas that you can grow in, and that was apparent, because the crazy thing is I used to observe all the other senior leaders around the Pentagon and say the very exact thing that I was guilty of. And it was eye-opening. So that's the third memory that I say helped shape me, because I would be a different chief coming into the 692nd ISRG had I not gone to the Pentagon. If I would have came straight from a squadron into this position, I would be night and day different. Guarantee it.
So I guess the Pentagon gave you a little. Obviously, I don't want to sound rude, but it kind of gave you a little taste of humility to let you know
humble
that.
Pie, shall I say?
So I know you like movie references, and I was just thinking of Will Smith in Independence Day. Whenever it's towards the beginning of the movie, whenever the aliens just arrive, and he's having a conversation with his girlfriend, soon-to-be fiance, and then soon-to-be wife, I guess, throughout the movie. But she lets him know that you are not as charming as you think you are.
That's exactly
how.
If I had a bumper sticker, that's one of the bumper stickers I would have on the back of my Jeep right now.
Obviously, Will Smith corrects her and says, "Yes, I am."
Yeah, of course, and that's what I did. No,
right,
I am.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Relationships are probably the most important thing in our force as well as society. Going back to this, the squishy problems that we have as a society, those relationships are vital. So obviously it doesn't have to follow along with specifically, relationships or building them, but what are some of the words of wisdom that you have for the Air Force's next generation of leaders?
You ready for this?
I am.
I probably should trademark this.
Okay, we can do that.
I can't because I got it from Samuel Jackson. He was in a movie called Juice.
He was.
Back in the day. For some of you, probably never even heard of a movie called Juice, but it's one of my favorites. Go back and watch it. Anyway, he makes a statement to some teenagers. He was like a shopkeeper or something. And he was like, and excuse my French if I offend anyone, he was like, just because you pour syrup on a shit, don't make it pancakes.
It's true.
It's true, right? So for any of you leaders out there, right, I think it's sage advice again, that we all need to continue to do the important things. We need to do the hard work. The hard work for us, I believe, is exactly what I've been talking about, from the beginning of this podcast, up until the end. It all points back to the people aspect of our jobs. A lot of times, we think just because we're pouring syrup on something that, man, that's what it is, man. I'm putting syrup on these pancakes, and that's what it's going to be, and that's not the case. And so, I was doing a NCO Coffee and Chill WebEx, and I was giving out final advice to the folks that were on that about you got to be able to go back to the basics with your leadership. Oftentimes where things go south is because there's probably some breakdown with the relationship, right? Maybe you think you're a good listener, but you're really not. Maybe you think you have enough rapport with somebody in order to have the right amount of influence to, provide guidance that is received the way you want it to be received, or X, Y, and Z. But that rapport is not there. Maybe you think you have the right communication level with the people that you work with, but you don't, right? So if you got to get back to basics. I think it's more important that the higher you go, that you don't forget the basics, because that's what I saw a lot of, at the, Pentagon, when you start to get beyond the group and the wing and you just go up and up and up, you see a lot of hyper focus on the strategic things, and that can be very time consuming. But you still have, whether it's a small team, on that team are human beings that still need to be motivated the right way. You still need to show them that you care about them. You ask the, do the small talk, ask the small questions, if they have a family, ask about their family. If they don't have a family, what do they do for fun? Whatever it is, whatever that means to you.
Right.
More often than not, we just put that stuff to the wayside and figure, especially if everybody has a little bit of age on them, right? Because you automatically just default to, this colonel or this chief has it all figured out, right? Good to go. And that's a part of why I had that rude awakening at the Pentagon, is because, it was all either general officers or 06s or chiefs, and it wasn't a lot of small talk, right? Or if it was meaningless, and it was in passing, and I've never really felt like it, I got there. And so even coming here to the group, when I, am privy to breakdowns of, issues within leadership or small teams, and, some group dysfunction, I guarantee it has to do, you can go back to the basics, and there's probably a breakdown in, the relationship somewhere. There's a breakdown in communication, all of those basic things that I've been talking about. So, if there was any one thing that I would leave, listeners with, is that you go back to basics. If you feel like you're struggling, you got to go back to basics. What am I missing? What am I not doing that is just as easy as coming in with a smile, right, to change the temperature of the room. Maybe it's I'm coming in not just smiling, but I'm saying good morning.
Right.
Or if I pass people, no matter how I'm feeling inside, I just had a terrible meeting with so-and-so, but that meeting didn't have anything to do with Sergeant whoever's sitting in my pathway as I'm walking by, or Captain whoever's sitting there as I'm walking by, or whatever, right? Chaplain talked a lot about self-awareness, after George Floyd, and we were having a lot of discussions about diversity and inclusion. You got to be self-aware because your actions, whether you are being deliberate or they're inadvertent, they impact everyone around you. And so, you got to get back to basics and, kind of think about what you're doing, think about how it's impacting the world around you. So that's what I got for you, bro.
So as you are transitioning to the entrepreneurial Mr. Warren Triche, what are pretty much your final thoughts or final words to all of your airmen, not just the ones that you have here at the 692nd, but throughout your many, many years of dedicated service?
Yeah. One love, I guess. Bob Marley. One love. Yeah, love yourself and love the people that you work with, right? Easier said than done. But I think that, if we are showing that we care about ourselves, that whole self-care mantra and caring for others, that's what is needed. If that's for all airmen, anybody that I've worked with in multiple assignments, and especially here in Hawaii, that that one love, right? And so you gotta really internalize that. So it's gonna mean something different to anybody that's listening, but that's what I'll leave you with.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure working with you and having you as a chief. The chiefs before you were vastly different, and I'm sure every chief after you will be the same.
Yeah,
So,
I don't see Chief Bjorkholm, giving advice on tasty whiskeys, such as myself. But she'll be good.
She might.
She'll be a good follow up to me.
We're gonna have to test her knowledge of Samuel L. Jackson movies as well.
No, she has none. She is. I don't even think if it's not Star Wars, she's not gonna know what you're talking about. You heard it here, first, folks.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
But Carol Baskins should got trivia. Carol Baskins, she'll go toe to toe with anyone.
Roger that. All right. Thank you very much, Chief. Have a good day.
All right. Aloha and mahalo.
Around the 55-minute mark, Chief talked about how Chaplain Edison discussed self-awareness after the George Floyd murder that shook the nation and caused rippled effects across the globe. What we didn't discuss in this episode was that Chief sat down with a number of group personnel on multiple occasions to ask how we were dealing with it as a diverse group of airmen, and shared some of his own experiences of being a black man in the United States Air Force and our society. As he opened up to us, he spoke specifically of finding flaws in his own thinking and actions when it relates to race and the perception of past events after reading Dr. Ibram Kendi's national bestseller, How to Be an Anti-Racist. He actively sought out resources to keep the conversations on diversity, inclusion, and racial equity going for those of us who are open to understanding the other side of the lens that a man like me, a white male, would never know to look through. He was not required to be open and vulnerable with us, but I personally am eternally grateful that he allowed us to see the world through his eyes, even for just a few moments. If you have any ideas, recommendations for future podcast shows, or guests that you'd like to hear from, let us know by going to any of the socially acceptable means of communication. Leave us a comment. Facebook URL is facebook.com/group/692D podcast. The email is simply 692dpodcast@gmail.com, and you can always leave us a message on the Mattermost channel. If you can't get to any of those, send me an email at derek.addison@us.af.mil, and I'll respond as soon as possible. That's the show for today. So for now, aloha, take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of someone else too.